You want to see something that's going to make you laugh? Actually, you might laugh or you might cry. I swear to God, this is the most ridiculous fucking shit I've seen all day. You guys remember Mitt Romney, right? Mitt Romney. Look at this clown. He says, Putin's Ukraine invasion is the first time in 80 years that a great power has moved to conquer a sovereign nation. It is without justification, without provocation, and without honor. You literally supported the invasion of Iraq. Mitt Romney supported that. I'm going to lose my mind. This is not just, when people try to deny history and like rewrite history, it's like they call it revisionism. This is not revisionism. This is fantasy. This is fucking fantasy. I cannot believe anyone wrote this. Like even the scum of the earth, the neoconservatives, like, George Bush and Dick Cheney would not say some shit like that. Like, I've never heard anyone say something like this. This is absolutely absurd. This is complete, I don't know what to even call it. You can, dude, go ahead. You want to insult Russia and Putin? Go off. Go off. But this is fucking fantasy. This shows that you are a lunatic. This shows that you've lost it. You have lost the plot. You, especially as an American politician, right? Like, it's one thing if you don't know history and you're ignorant. This motherfucker's not that dumb. He knows damn well he supported the invasion of Iraq. I mean, I literally cannot tell you all of the countries that the U.S. has invaded since the end of World War II. It's too much. I'm going to read to you now a statement from French President Emmanuel Macron. He says, La France condamne fermement la décision de la Russie de faire la guerre à l'Ukraine. La Russie doit mettre immédiatement fin à ses opérations militaires. So he's saying France strongly condemns the Russian decision to wage war against Ukraine, and Russia must immediately put an end to its military operations. So you remember Emmanuel Macron, he was going and meeting with Putin in person. He also spoke with him on the phone for several hours, it was reported, which compare that with a few minutes, where other leaders call. And he I think, again, I'm not really a fan of Macron, especially with all the neo-colonial shit that he does and says, like, we're not going to apologize for genociding Algeria, things like that. But, Macron, at least compared to the US, at least compared to the UK, has tried to be diplomatic, even though he tried to save the situation and portray himself as a broker. Well, that's not worked. This is the statement from the Iranian foreign minister reacting to Ukraine. He says that the crisis in Ukraine is rooted in NATO provocations. We do not see resorting to war as a solution. Establishing a ceasefire and focusing on a political and democratic solution is a necessity. Ursula von der Leyen, as you know, is the head of the EU Commission. She's a very interesting character. She says, Russian forces invaded Ukraine, a free and sovereign country. We condemn this barbaric attack and the cynical arguments used to justify it. Later today, we will present a package of massive, targeted sanctions.
Later today, we will present a package of massive and targeted sanctions.
Okay, first of all, there's no such thing as targeted sanctions. This is a myth. I'm going to keep saying this till the end of time. Sanctions are warfare. Sanctions are siege warfare, okay? When you sanction a country and you make a list of individuals that you're targeting, the president, the prime minister, so on, those people in the government, their standard of living does not change. It doesn't change. And they know that you're going to sanction them. So they've made all these arrangements to make sure that the country, and specifically their wealth and their standard of living remains the same. It's the civilians who get hurt. So there's no such thing as targeted sanctions. Anyone who advocates for sanctions is a goddamn dunce. They either have no clue what sanctions are, or they're the ones who aren't on the receiving end.
With this package, we will target strategic sectors of the Russian economy by blocking their access to technologies and markets that are key for Russia.
If you try and weaken Russia, it's going to come back to bite you. Russia provides 40% of Europe's gas. Now, you can play with Nord Stream 2, but I'm telling you, it's happened before. When there were tensions, Russia can turn off the valves a little bit, raise the prices. Europeans are going to get hurt.
These sanctions are designed to take a heavy toll on the Kremlin's interests and their ability to finance war.
That is so ridiculous. Have you forgotten that Russia entered an arms race with the United States for 70 years? Close to, actually, it's close to 50 years. But the Russian military might, the industrial might, started already in World War II. And that's how Russia won World War II. And it continued and continued and developed. And Russia today has one of the most powerful armies in the world. And it doesn't just have numbers. It has quality weapons, right? Whether it's surface-to-air missiles, the jets, the naval, all of its combined armed forces. You're not going to do anything. Putin is not stupid. The Russians are not stupid. They have gold reserves. Scott Ritter was talking about that earlier. The Russians have contingency plans. Again, that doesn't mean that sanctions are not going to hurt civilians. They do. They always hurt civilians. But Russia has already things planned and a contingency for its military might.
I call on Russia to immediately stop the violence and to withdraw its troops from Ukraine's territory.
That's really great. Israel bombed my country, bombed Syria a few hours ago, and killed 3 Syrian soldiers. Israel has been bombing Syria every week almost for years. So is the United States. The UK also has special forces there. They're all financing Al-Qaeda and killing tons of Syrians. Are you going to ask them to stop the fucking violence? Oh no, I remember. You're part of the problem, right? You're sanctioning Syria and making sure that my cousins and other people in Syria starve. Thank you so much, you imperialist tool, you clown.
He should not underestimate the resolve and strength of our democracies. And
your democracies, you're literally funding fucking neo-Nazis in Ukraine. What democracies? And here's another thing. If you really care about democracy, the Minsk agreements stipulated that you give autonomous status to Donetsk and Luhansk, and that you treat the people there like they're actually Ukrainians. The Russian speakers, you treat them like equals, like a democracy, like the democracy you claim to be. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this situation. I mean, why do they not follow through with their promises? Why, every time the Americans make a deal, Iran nuclear deal, assurances for David Mendoza's extradition, treaties with the natives, right? Treaties with the actual Native Americans, the agreement not to expand NATO, the Minsk agreement, they never ever follow through on it. And they act like nothing happened with NATO bombing Yugoslavia. Why don't you talk about that? Like, you keep talking about, sovereignty and all these things and territorial integrity. Why are you condemning Russia for using the exact same playbook that you use? You're hypocrites. While Russia was going into Ukraine, the United Nations, right? You had a Security Council emergency meeting at the UN. And the contrast here is just so laughable. But let me play you first what they're saying, all these countries, specifically Ukraine.
Well, as I said, relinquish your duties as a chair. Call Putin, call Lavrov to stop aggression. And I welcome the decision of some members of this council to meet as soon as possible to consider the necessary decision that would condemn the aggression that you launch on my people. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
What I wanted to point out to you is that while the United Nations is holding an emergency meeting at the Security Council, Russia is going into Ukraine, and it's really so telling of how useless the UN is. This literally embodies how useless the United Nations is. Whatever you think about Russia, whatever you think about Ukraine, whatever you think about this crisis, this goes beyond that. And then, of course, you have another issue where even if the UN can do an agreement and broker a resolution or whatever kind of a ceasefire or agreement, you can't count on anyone or everyone rather to abide by it. Both of my parents worked in the UN, and it's because of them I know how useless the UN is. Like they're the first ones to tell me that. It doesn't mean that the UN is fundamentally an evil organization. No, not at all. But it's just too big and it's too incompetent. And the problem is that not everyone abides by what it decides. So even when they do the right thing, I can just give you an example of not just Minsk, but let's say the multiple UN Security Council resolutions, for example, 242, calling for Israel to withdraw. Yeah, great. Everyone voted for it. Thank you. But is it being implemented? No. And now we're like 50 years later, 60 years later, nothing. So the Labour leader, the UK Labour leader, Keir Starmer, who is as charismatic as a bookshelf, has tweeted out that Vladimir Putin's attack on Ukraine is unprovoked and unjustifiable. His actions will have horrendous and tragic consequences that will echo throughout the world and throughout history. All those who believe in the triumph of democracy over dictatorship, good over evil, freedom over the jackboot of tyranny, must now support the Ukrainian people. They have been cast onto the front line of a war simply for existing. Pay attention to the language. International order, not law, not international law, order, right? They always talk about this like rules. They talk about international norms, right? And what does that mean, norms? Because the West has set up a framework of international law. It's not just the West, of course, China, Russia are also UN founding members, and the UN is not the only international body. But my point is that you often hear Western countries underscore my chair was creaking. I was like, what was that? They often underscore the importance of international norms, but not laws. Why is that? I think it's because they're like lawyers. Literally, these politicians are lawyers. They word things in a way where they make you think that they're saying something, but it's actually something completely different, and always pay attention to the language. They say, Keir Starmer says, there will be dark days ahead, but Putin will learn the same lesson as Europe's tyrants of the last century, that the resolve of the world is harder than he imagines and the desire for liberty burns stronger than ever. The light will prevail. The hardest possible sanctions must be taken against all those linked to Putin. The influence of Russian money must be extra. Hold on a second. Did you see what he's saying here? We must urgently reinforce our NATO allies. Ukraine is not a NATO ally. You have Keir Starmer here saying that, the UK must reduce the influence of Russian money in Britain. And this is so funny because he's the Labour leader, right, in the UK. And Labour's idea of challenging or tackling this Ukraine crisis hasn't been, we are in NATO and we have been moving forward and eastwards more and more and encircling Russia, and now they feel threatened. And this is why we're in this crisis. Ukraine didn't abide by the Minsk agreement. No, there's no common sense. Labour's idea of tackling the Ukraine crisis has been, you see, the Tories take too much money from Russian oligarchs. They're owned by the Russians. So they've been basically pushing a Russiagate variation. That's it. It's just a variant of Russiagate to say that, oh, look, Boris Johnson, he and his oligarch mates, he's controlled by the Russians. They didn't put in hard enough sanctions on Russia because they're taking money from Russia. That's literally what they've been saying, right? They've been criticizing the UK government. So the opposition has been criticizing the Tories for not sanctioning Russia hard enough. What does that even mean? That's like saying you're not starving those people hard enough. It's literally the same thing. Obviously, Russia, I hope anyway, that it would not get to a point like Syria or something. No one should be in that point. But that is what sanctions are. From Olaf Scholz, who's the German chancellor, who you saw get cucked the other day when Biden was standing next to him and, just basically spoke for him and for Germans that, we're going to take away your Nord Stream 2. So der russische Angriff auf die Ukraine ist ein eklatanter Bruch des Völkerrechts, right? So he's saying that this is the Russian attack on Ukraine it's a clear violation of the law, and and Germany condemns this in the sharpest terms, and they give their solidarity to Ukraine and its population and its people. So, I expected that, right? We all expected that. No surprises there, because Germany is basically playing along, right? They're playing along, and of course they're going to say that everything Russia does is bad. And I honestly, when it comes to Nord Stream 2, you know, he hadn't said anything really, right? He wasn't saying anything about canceling it until yesterday when he was pressured by the US. And it's very interesting because I think that showed that he wasn't completely on board with being a cuck. I don't know. It's not really your choice when you're a German chancellor. But anyway, he's clearly saying here that, you know, that it's a violation of international law and so on. And it says, Russland muss diese Militäraktion sofort einstellen. So they should immediately cease their military actions. And in the framework of the G7, NATO, and the EU, we are going to... werden wir uns heute eng absprechen. Dies ist ein fruchtbarer Tag für die Ukraine und ein dunkler Tag für Europa. This is a dark day, a terrible day for Ukraine and a dark day for Europe. So, yeah, I mean, this is, you know, you're not going to find any difference from what he's saying in the French and so on. I feel like they have these curated statements just like prepared in advance. Whatever, man, you know, this is expected. Don't be surprised by that. I think the Nord Stream 2 is much more indicative and consequential than this statement, obviously. Turkey. President Erdogan is convening a security summit now in Ankara, right? So the Turkish presidency on February 24th convened a security summit with relevant ministers and security officers after Russia launched a military operation in Ukraine. Turkish Foreign Ministry has issued a security warning for its citizens in Ukraine on February 24th. And said it would provide necessary support and guidance to Turks who wish to leave Ukraine. They advised Turkish citizens to stay in their houses and avoid traveling. Turkish airlines have canceled all flights to Ukraine because of the closure of Ukrainian airspace. Turkish President Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone a day ago, February 23rd, ahead of Russia's military action. Erdogan told Putin that Turkey was ready to do its part in calming down tensions in Ukraine. Yeah, you know how Erdogan would do that? He'd probably like send over a boatload of jihadists that he's taken from Idlib. I wish I was joking, but this guy is really bent on... He's a weird character. Every single day he changes his positions. You know, one day he's like, oh, I support the Palestinians. And then the next day he's inviting the Israelis over to Turkey for a meeting. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?